Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues. Mr. President, the sole remaining item on the agenda today is the act to apply a sum out of the consolidated fund to the service of the year ending on the 31st day of March 2026, and to appropriate the sums granted in this session of Parliament. It's a bill known as the Appropriations Act, and otherwise called the Budget Bill. It is now my honor to pilot this bill through the Senate. Mr. President, as members of this chamber, we're always very clear of our duty as parliamentarians to the people of Jamaica. People of Jamaica choose a government and bestow on that government the awesome responsibility of good governance, of making laws for the peace and good governance of this country. One of the most important duties in this universe of undertakings is the duty of managing the nation's finances. So as we approach the end of another fiscal year and embark on the start of a new one, our sense of duty and purpose is even further heightened. We're called on to explain to the people of Jamaica our plans for the revenues and expenditures, and to get parliamentary approval for the budget at the start of each financial year. The opposition, of course, is expected to present as part of that process its alternatives. Importantly, the budget identifies the government's priorities in terms of the goals and aspirations for the development and upliftment of the Jamaican people. And for us, those elements touch every facet of life: every mother and father, every child, every household, every student, every teacher, every worker and workplace, every citizen at all stages of life across the country. For us, the budget is for and about the people of Jamaica in the truest sense. Mr. President, the Constitution of Jamaica, Section 116(1), as a matter of fact, stipulates that the Minister with responsibility for finance shall, in respect of each financial year, introduce in the House of Representatives an appropriation bill, and this must outline the estimated aggregate sums proposed to be expended during that financial year on the appropriate heads set out. The bill is therefore not a long one. It is this very bill that has been passed in that other place that now comes to us for consideration today. We're aware that it is a money bill, and therefore the Senate has no authority to make amendments, but we do acknowledge that its contents are in fact worthy of debate. Mr. President, under the Appropriations Bill, and as referenced in clauses 2 and 3, the sum of $885,141,671,000, as specified in column 2 of the schedule to the bill before us, is provided for, comprised of both recurrent and capital budgets, in order to defray the purposes and under the heads of expenditure set out under column 1, also provided for in the schedule. Mr. President, the sums provided for in column 2 are taken together with those in column 3, which are listed as appropriations in aid, and these are comprised of the fees and penalties and proceeds of sale that would normally have been paid into the consolidated fund, but with ministries, departments, and agencies are allowed to keep to offset their operating expenses. So both of these are put together and are set out in the schedule to the Appropriations Bill, which is before us for consideration. Mr. President, in support of the Appropriations Bill, the government has delivered excellent budget presentations in that other place, setting out the plans and priorities of this administration. Mr. President, we received a master class in responsible financial management from Jamaica's first woman ever to deliver a budget to Jamaica, the Honorable Favour Williams, demonstrating this administration's very real belief in the empowerment of women. This is another area in which we don't just talk, but we act and we deliver. We also had the benefit of receiving an educational, inspirational, and responsive presentation by Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, and together they were unmatched in terms of breadth, vision, and clarity on a feasible and sustainable path towards national development, reflecting the sound and steady leadership Jamaica continues to need if we are to achieve our developmental goals in the interests of all Jamaicans. This, Mr. President, strong and steady management is how we ensure that no one is left behind and that all Jamaicans have the opportunity to achieve their dreams. Mr. President, in the government's budget presentations in that other place, where matters were to be phased in, like the income tax threshold increases, which start next month and will take place over the subsequent 2 years, and the asset tax reduction for financial institutions, for which consultations will be undertaken, and the rural bus system, which starts with the expansion of current routes. When things were to be phased, we said so during the budget debate, as credible leaders understanding fully the seriousness of the process being undertaken within these chambers and the integrity it requires. Mr. President, this morning I want the people of Jamaica to be reassured of a few things. One, that the government has its best interests at heart. Two, that the government respects the people of Jamaica and takes them seriously and the trust that they have put in us. Three, that we have been managing the country in a way that is producing some of the best results since independence, and it is to give us the ability to do more for them. Four, that we've prepared an actual, solid, and credible budget that stands up to scrutiny, and that our plans for the next fiscal year, which have been shared, are credible and well thought out, and of course, that this budget builds on the achievements of the Jamaican people in support of their government and to deliver more and achieve more together. Mr. President, while there is still much work to be done, we can be proud of the significant progress our nation has made. It is irrefutable that independent Jamaica is in its most resilient economic position ever. We are in our best position that despite the effects from shocks, including natural disasters, and even sustaining technically two consecutive contraction periods, we recognize the resilience of our economy and the fact, Mr. President, that we are on an upward trajectory again. Mr. President, I want to just touch on a couple points as to how we got to the place of being able to present the credible budget which we have. The one which has been certified as credible by the Fiscal Commission, yet another institution established as a part of our reforms. Mr. President, through well-managed fiscal and monetary policy, the average annual inflation under this administration has been 5.5%, the lowest under any administration since 1972. And our current annual inflation is down to 4.4% at the lower end of BOJ's target range of 4 to 6%. Mr. President, in respect of employment and job creation, when we took office in 2016, the unemployment rate was 13.7%, and now the unemployment rate is at a historic low of 3.5%. Since 2016, we have created 253,000 new jobs, an average of 28,000 new jobs per year. Our rate of job creation is nearly twice that of the PNP's. Mr. President, in 2016, youth unemployment, again where we found it, was at an alarming 32%, meaning 1 of every 3 young people was unemployed in 2016. And now it is down to 11%, Mr. President, a third of where we found it. Mr. President, there are some people who tell the Jamaican people that we are hiding behind numbers and that the jobs are not quality jobs. But these are not only the same people who couldn't provide the jobs or the framework to facilitate these jobs in the first place. and the ones who are now standing right in the BPO sector that they have cried down for years for their own political narrow agenda, even as we grow it, to now say that BPO jobs will be a big part of their plans. We were there before COVID, believing in the BPO sector, Mr. President. During COVID, making strategic changes that ensured that while BPOs were shutting down in other countries, ours were able to stay open, keeping people employed and earning. So I say to the BPO operators and indeed to the knowledge processing operators who we are encouraging to establish themselves here, that we have always understood your worth and will continue to partner with you in achieving inclusive growth and job creation. You can't make these things up, Mr. President. You cannot make these things up. You can't script them. I want to emphasize, Mr. President, that the unemployment statistics that they say we are hiding behind represent real people and real jobs, impacting families and communities positively. Young people who once faced no opportunities are seeing doors open. Mothers and fathers who struggle to make ends meet are doing better for their families, securing stable employment and building a brighter future. Is there more to be done? Always, and we are committed to that. But to try to say that the figures don't mean anything is to do a disservice to the people going out to lawful employment every day, building Jamaica. It does a disservice to them. And so we say to them that as they continue to choose to maintain the faith with this administration, they can be sure that the future will be brighter for them with our continued efforts. Mr. President, the government has also brought Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio down to unprecedented levels. Next week, it will be at just above 68%, 68.7%. Another significant achievement recognized the world over as a model for development, and one in respect of which we have not been uncharitable about recognizing the contributions made by others. But it is indisputable that it is this Andrew Holness-led administration that has taken the difficult, strategic, and prudent decisions to ensure that even through the worst global pandemic and economic crisis in 100 years, we have been able to protect and build on our gains. Mr. President, this is the first time that our debt to GDP ratio has fallen below pre-FinSAC levels in the mid-1990s. We did not fall prey to some of the opposition's calls to just give away money, Mr. President. We have been responsible stewards of Jamaica's trust, and even in this critical year, we have not run with it.
That's right.
We have been disciplined in paying down the debt because we understand that that is how you ensure the government has room to spend sustainably on things that matter to the Jamaican people. We know that more and more Jamaicans are understanding that there is a direct link between the government's good economic management and their ability to get social housing, to get access to affordable loans for housing, to get attention at new and upgraded health centers and hospitals, to attend new and better schools, to get skills training for free and stipends to help you start your own business, to have domestic violence shelters that accommodate children, and more support to get teen mothers back into school, to benefit from increases in income tax exemption thresholds, to get water installed in your community that has never had water before, to ride on new buses, to create an environment for you to be able to save to pay down on a car or a house, to drive on decent roads, indeed to benefit from the cleanliness provided by new garbage trucks and to get proper irrigation and support for farms, to protect fish stock, and to get better fishing gear and other support for fishers. Mr. President, in the words of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, good economic management can yam.
Yes.
Mr. President, the budget represents yet another consecutive budget with no new taxes whatsoever. And this is not the world's achievement. It is not something to be taken for granted. It is the result of deliberate choices and strategic hard work. It is an excellent achievement which redounds to the benefit of our people and one which has changed the whole level of expectations around budgets and the budget cycle. But, Mr. President, we have done more than not introduce new taxes. We have reduced more taxes than in any period under independence. And if you just look back, in respect of the income tax threshold, when we came to office, the threshold was $592,800. It is now $1.7 million and will move to 1.8 next month, and then to 2 million in the next two budgets. Mr. President, every PAYE taxpayer should take comfort that as much as this administration can, we will reduce their income tax and we will give them back more. Mr. President, we reduced GCT from 16.5%, where it was when we came to office, to 15%, and we're reducing GCT on residential electricity by more than 50%, from 15% to 7% in the upcoming financial year. We reduced transfer tax on property from 5% to 2% and replaced ad valorem stamp duty with a flat rate of $5,000 per document, unleashing the ability of people to be able to deal with their property, their family land, and other ways in which they hold land to create wealth. Mr. President, we increased the pension relief and the age relief from $80,000 to $250,000 each, and we plan to increase this in the next budget year to $350,000. Mr. President, we reduced estate taxes, in addition to those I referenced before, reduced the asset tax on financial institutions, on which we plan to do more in consultations, and we abolished the asset tax on non-financial institutions. And to encourage entrepreneurs and small businesses, we increased the turnover threshold required for registration to pay GCT from $3 million to $10 million, unleashing the administrative power and the resources of these small businesses and not tying it down in getting ready for GCT. And now we are increasing it further to $15 million. More relief for small businesses, Mr. President. And this is in addition to our abolition of the minimum business tax imposed by the PNP that had small businesses paying taxes before they even paid a salary or made a profit. That, Mr. President, is how you get businesses to formalize, and that is how we have seen numbers grow exponentially since then.
When government good, government good.
Mr. President, it used to be that people would cower in fear and suffer from high blood pressure when the budget is due to be read. But that is no more, Mr. President, under this Andrew Holness-led administration. Mr. President, I've only looked at a few elements, and these numbers tell a story of transformation of an economy that has overcome decades of instability. I could have gone into the exchange rate and NIR and inflation and all of the, beyond inflation, but today I will not. What I will say is that these numbers now tell a story of a level of stability, strength, and resilience that Jamaica has never before experienced. It is not something to take for granted. Leadership matters. Mr. President, the Prime Minister in that other place spoke about the next chapter, about not only maintaining fiscal and macroeconomic stability, but accelerating growth. And he, in his presentation, captured the key pillars under the theme Aspire. Access to economic opportunity for all, inclusive growth, safety and security, people and our focus on human capital development, infrastructure development, reform for bureaucracy to improve ease and speed and cost of doing business, and economic diversification. Mr. President, I'm sure my colleagues will have elements of these pillars in their presentations. And I just want to touch on one aspect, and that is under the A. This is about the access and inclusion and growth being for all Jamaicans. I just want to speak a little bit to the systematic strengthening of our social protection framework, the expanding of opportunities, and the breaking of generational poverty. In 2021, we introduced Jamaica's first ever social pension, and we increased it by 120% since then. Mr. President, this is for pensioners, or rather elders over the age of 70 who were not attached are receiving a regular pension. So this has really helped the standard of living of our elders. We have ramped up investment in the new social housing program. I know many of us see the very emotionally charged and very moving ceremonies where persons are having their lives changed. In 2022, we were the first country in the world to implement a tourism workers' pension scheme. I'm sure we will hear more about that. And in 2024, we launched the Jamaica Entertainers and Creatives Insurance Plan, among other support to our creative sector. In 2024, Mr. President, we also increased funding for PATH by 30%, having already increased it by 40% in 2017. Mr. President, in the upcoming year, we'll introduce the Hope for Children Trust Fund, again to break the cycle of generational poverty, a long-term visionary program. I hope we'll hear more about it. And on the more immediate but still inclusionary path, we're introducing $1 billion solidarity program to provide cash grants to vulnerable individuals who are not enrolled in PATH, who are not on a social pension, who don't receive NIS or the reverse income tax credit. They are on the margins of society, Mr. President, and we want to bring them in. Mr. President, as I close in summary, I just want to note that the central government expenditure for the financial year 25-26 is projected at $1.26 trillion, and it's comprised of the non-debt expenditure of $919.8 billion and debt service of $340.3 billion. Mr. President, the budget is formulated to ensure achievement of the overarching medium-term debt to GDP target, so none of the expenditure will throw this out. And the fiscal program aims to support the objective of reducing public debt and debt servicing costs, thereby creating fiscal space to facilitate growth-inducing expenditure and, of course, some of the social support which I spoke of earlier. Mr. President, just to break out that in respect of non-debt expenditure, the central government non-debt expenditure budget is projected, at the same $919.8 billion which I just referenced, which is made up of recurrent expenditure of $857.2 billion and capital expenditure of $62.6 billion. So the total non-debt recurrent figure which I just gave also comprises compensation of employees of $495.8 billion and recurrent programs of the $361.4 billion. Mr. President, the budget will be funded, the central government budget will be funded by projected revenues and grants of $1,096 billion, so $1,096.1 billion, with tax revenue programmed at $949.5 billion, which is 27.3% of GDP. Tax revenue is projected to account for 86.6% of total revenue and grants, reflecting an increase compared to 83.3% of the estimated outturn for financial year 2024-2025. Mr. President, approximately $4.9 billion is projected to come from investment flows and $578 million from cash resources. Mr. President, the appropriation bill is before us for approval. I've spoken a bit about how we have come to this space and just one or two aspects of how we plan to go forward. I very much look forward to the contributions of colleagues on both sides as we consider this critical money bill today. Thank you, Mr. President.